Data governance is about three different things. What you do with data that you don't control, you bring into your control. What you do to bring that data under your control within the organization, and what happens after that data leaves your control. All the rules, processes, and policies that you establish to do that process, that is what data governance is about.
SC Media and our sponsor Spirion are proud to present this month's CISO Stories program. Each month, the CISO Stories program explores a cybersecurity topic selected by the Cyber Risk Alliance's CISO community and provides content that examines that topic from a variety of perspectives. Hosted by Todd Fitzgerald, best-selling author of CISO Compass, the CISO Stories weekly podcast features content powered by the 1,100-plus members of the Cyber Risk Alliance's CISO community. Listen to previous CISO Stories podcast episodes at CISOstoriespodcast.com. Cybersecurity Collaborative is a unique membership community enabling cybersecurity leaders to work together in a trusted environment. To learn more, visit CISOstoriespodcast.com/CSC. I'm your host, Todd Fitzgerald, and this week we welcome Stephen Fox, Director, Information Security and Regulatory Compliance at Educational Testing Services. Welcome, Stephen.
Thank you, Todd. It's a pleasure to be here on the show. This is my first time here, but I've been a long-time listener of your podcast.
Excellent. So as a long-time listener, you know then that I like to find out what got people into this field. What attracted you to the cybersecurity space?
Well, that's an interesting question. So I was largely self-taught. I taught myself assembly when I was in high school and taught myself a lot of different computer languages throughout the end of that journey. When I was entering college, I figured, well, I already knew about computers, but people use computers. So my choice for undergrad was actually psychology. Because I figured if I understood people, I could actually do a better job in helping people work with computers. And that got me into developing websites and in the process of doing that, discovering information security by stumbling upon it with hacking. I was able to hack into some systems for some small companies that hired me to actually do web development. They was like, hey, we've got the security issue. Could you help me figure it out? And that's how I got into security, just through the entrepreneurial process of helping other people.
So hopefully you were hacking for good, right?
I was.
Okay, so I just want to make sure we try to keep this a family program, and I want to make sure that our cybersecurity people are on the good side of things.
Yep.
So today we're talking about data governance and the riddle of data governance. So could you give a brief overview of what data governance really entails?
Well, if you take nothing from this podcast, think of three things. Data governance is about three different things. What you do with data that you don't control, you bring into your control. What you do to bring that data under your control within the organization, and what happens after that data leaves your control. All the rules, processes, and policies that you establish to do that process, that is what data governance is about. Now, certainly there's a lot of details that we can unpack around that, but if you remember those three things, you'll be able to have good conversations with your data governance professionals at work.
So you work with the educational testing services, which obviously you have a lot of data that's coming in and that you're creating your own sets of data that also has to go out.
So in my career, what I've dealt with mostly, what got me into data governance initially was the GDPR, the General Data Protection Regulations. And this was about 10 years ago when it was first coming out, replacing Privacy Shield. And I got to learn about the way that the US was managing data at a sectoral perspective, and the European community was focused on data protection as a individual right. And that just fascinated me from the psychological perspective. And I wanted to understand, well, how does it impact the way that we actually protect data and govern it from a IT audit perspective? Because I was a IT audit professional. And at the time, I was working for a federal agency. And then I moved on with that expertise into a SaaS provider that's based out of here in Michigan. Um, and I got to travel and work with countries such as Australia, which was really fascinating mix of EU but also American rules. But also in the working with the UK, which has a similar mix of traditions. That work really helped me understand that data governance impacts infrastructure, the way that you actually protect data and you segment it across different systems. It impacts how you encrypt the data and where you choose not to, and the access rates you apply to it. So those basic lessons took me into my return back to public service over the 2 years before I left the state of Washington, helping them develop their information security policy stack to help them protect data, which is the essential thing that we're all trying to protect as security professionals. That achievement helped me then move to educational testing service, which I'll refer to as ETS moving forward here. There, we're just trying to understand how do we protect the data of test takers? It's all the same rules, it's just a different audience we're dealing with. So I'm still dealing with a lot of the same challenges in ensuring that we take in quality data, that we maintain that quality, put in the rules to make that data accessible and usable by the various products that we provide to our customers. So we need to go to market quickly, but still protect that data. But then at some point, that data becomes a liability if we hold on to it too long. So we have to get rid of it. But we have to get rid of it the right way so as not to produce more liabilities. So a lot of the data governance that we're dealing with right now is governing that overall process.
Got data? Know where it is? At Spirion, they're dedicated to helping organizations find and protect their most sensitive information. A single mission: deliver unmatched 98.5% accuracy in discovering personal, sensitive, and regulated data, no matter where it lives, with actionable insights to protect what matters most. That's why Spirion is step one. Visit CISOstoriespodcast.com/Spirion to learn more. And I'm glad to hear you mention things like GDPR. I think it's such a great law, and we published a new book in 2024 called the Privacy Leader Compass, which like the CISO Compass that was for chief security officers and the teams on how to lead a security program. We created this book that's all targeted around all those things that we need to do for privacy. And I'm just very passionate about the fact that security officers need to understand the privacy regulations, because that's what's really driving this need to know, where is your information, and how are you managing that, and how long are you keeping it, and who has access to it.
It's great that you should mention that, Todd, because one of the first lessons I learned around data governance was to do it the right way. You have to partner with privacy. It isn't just security involved, because security just has that puzzle piece about how to secure the information. Privacy has all the skills governing how you use the information in alignment with the organizational strategy. And if you don't work together, the overall effort fails.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's a really good point. So how does data governance impact the quality of the information and improve that within the organization?
So where I've seen quality work very well is you need to have a dedicated team of people that evaluate data coming in. So the intake process, it has to happen as soon as you intake data. And they run statistical analyses on it compared to industry benchmarks to tease out any defects in that data. And there's a lot of resources available. Unfortunately, most of those are subscription for certain industries. Public sector has some access through the MSISAC that helps a lot for that. But that that analytical process is very important to ensure that you are introducing faulty data into the process. But then you have to maintain the integrity of that data as it's being used. And that's where the collaboration with IT comes in. You can use various encryption algorithms that detect lack of integrity and other controls. And that's where that partnership comes in with information security, is to be sure that, at least from an integrity perspective, what has come in stays at a certain level. Now, as the information ages, then you have to collaborate with the business units that consume that information. And now they're responsible for saying, is this information still current given our business conditions? I was in a project in the federal space where we had consumed data about a year previously, and that process involves some collaboration with investigative services at this agency. And we discovered that as a function of the nature in which that information was collected, it was only valid for 1 year. At some point, that little detail, which was a pretty big deal, really, but that detail had been lost, and the business unit was using it for for a year and a half. When there was an audit done to check the use of the information, they had to throw out all the records that they had been using past that 1 year deadline because they were now in violation of federal law. Now, thankfully, this had been caught by an internal audit. It wasn't caught by a FISMA audit where that was communicated out beyond the individual business unit. But that's an example of enforcement by an audit agency where they're an audit function to ensure that data integrity is aligning with regulatory constraints.
Hmm. So if our data is this is in our discussion, the organizational fuel, for organizations today, how do we maximize the value of that through our data governance programs?
So during it goes back to the intake process, just like you go to the gas station and you pick the right fuel. You have to know exactly, what do I intend to do with this fuel? Am I just going to be conducting business as usual in case you just pick regular? If you know you're using a high performance vehicle, you might choose to go with a more expensive fuel that has been processed in a special way. Um, I know that if you intend to go beyond just the metaphor of a car, you would never see a aircraft using regular fuel. There are special fuels for aircraft utilization. So if you take that metaphor of the nature in which the fuel is being used, you have to think about, what is my business strategy? What are the criteria I'm going to be applying to the data that I'm taking in? And you have to apply those criteria throughout the data journey within your organization. So it's really, really important that if you don't have any processes right now, the first thing you have to do is set those criteria about what you intend to do with the data. So that's first. And then you apply that to the very first time that you intake data. If you did that one thing this year, you would be way ahead of every other organization that is trying to do this well.
Mhm. And we tend to keep data for a
Yeah,
long time as well, too, don't we? And how do we decide that? I know when we organizations I've been in, it's typically the lawyers actually want you to keep very little data, and then the business units want more data because they want to be able to draw longer term insights off of that. So how do we find that balance of how
that
much data
that
to
really
keep?
requires some tough conversations with the people that own the risk, your senior management, to find out how long what is the minimum amount of time that I have to keep this data. Now, things like PII or health data, that's mandated. So you can look to regulatory frameworks such as HIPAA, FERPA for educational data, or any other frameworks in place. Those would be your easy points of reference.
Mhm.
But you're going to have those other areas that aren't governed by a regulatory body. Those are governed by your business stakeholders. You cannot be the one to decide that because ultimately you don't own the risk. You have to go to the people that are accountable that if that data is breached, it's a danger to their evaluation or their jobs.
Yeah, I know with like healthcare records, you tend to have to keep those for a very long time.
Yeah.
In some cases, until the person is deceased or past that point. With financial records, it may be up to 7 years or less, depending on what the organization is held to.
Mhm.
So, so how does the data governance help us with getting our access rights correct?
So there, that goes back to that defining here's how sensitive my data is. What are the people that have a need to have access to that data, and actually need that data to add value to the company? So, where I've seen that work well is a collaboration between the data governance team, usually privacy and a little bit of security, interfacing with HR to figure out, okay, what are the roles in our organization? What do they need to have access to? What kind of jobs do they do? Okay, their job description, what kind of data do they need? And have very clear linkages between that need to know and the data. And then establishing controls through internal audit, to monitor the access to that data. Now, where things get complicated is as someone grows in their journey, a long-time employee can start off as an entry-level individual that has minimal access. They could get promoted in 2 years. Now they're maybe an associate. Then they become a manager maybe 3 years later. Their access grows. But is that access then audited each time? I've seen many examples where someone had access to information when they had worked as an engineer, but they moved on to managing a whole different group that
Mhm.
didn't need that information. They still had
Mhm.
access to it.
And a
Where
lot of
that was
times,
discovered during a third party audit. That was very problematic. We have to explain why the failure had happened in that role audit.
yeah, and what I've seen in the past too is how that happens a lot is users are created just like another user in the
Mhm.
department, and so well they need to have the same access, and meanwhile they carry with them all the other access that they had from the department that they came from, and pretty soon you have this person that has all kinds of access that
Right.
they shouldn't have. So what do you think about AI today? And is that going to help us with all the trying to figure out where all this data is and what we should do with it, or is that just going to make our issue that much worse?
For me, AI makes this much more difficult because now you have to really think about what not only how the AI is gathering data, but also where that data is going right away. So, for example, last time I saw you was at InfoSec World at a conference, and I was talking with several vendors, and they were providing various solutions, and they were saying we are AI powered. There was lots of those, and after talking to a few of them, say half-hour conversations, they were finally revealed that they were sending network telemetry back to OpenAI.
Wow.
What they couldn't tell me is whether that was in a large language model that it was paid for and it was closed, or if it was training the lower cost open model.
Yeah.
That goes back to what I mentioned, that third piece I mentioned about what happens when you lose control of your data. Where is that data going?
Mhm. Yeah.
The use of AI will make those three steps instantaneous. You have to worry about that in a moment. Whereas before you had a few months, a year or more to worry about this stuff. As soon as you buy that product, you got to figure that stuff out in seconds.
Mhm.
Well, you know, pretty quickly.
Have you?
Now, I'm not anti-AI. It's about working with a vendor that can explain to you, okay, one of the main attributes of good AI is explainability. If they can tell you, yes, your data is being sent to a closed large language model, you're paying for that. Part of our business model is to charge you for that model. Now you know that your data is closed. Microsoft does that. With their AI offering, their agreement with their data security agreement with you as a subscriber states that whatever, if you choose to use their AI offerings, that data stays within your instance.
Mhm.
That's totally cool. Now you know where your data is going.
Yeah.
If you can't
And
know that with someone else, maybe they aren't the best choice.
And I think that's what we're figuring out today is,
Yeah,
where those guardrails are. And I think as we evolve, I think that's a very good point.
yeah.
It just won't be acceptable to be, you know, having this stuff being put into a public area. So are there frameworks that, if I'm, looking at, if I said tomorrow, hey, I really need to improve my data governance program, are there frameworks that can assist in that?
I'm really happy that you asked that. I'm going to drop a link into chat here. You can put this here in your show notes. The National Association of CIOs published in 2019 a reference of all the known data governance frameworks as of that date.
Excellent.
And there's quite a few of them ranked by level of sophistication. There's a couple in here that are very good for people that are just starting off, people that are really mature in their journey. I definitely would point your audience to check out that document. It's available to both private and public sector customers.
We'll make sure that we put that up on the show notes. I think that would be great. So early in my own career, and I've mentioned this before on this podcast, I spent half my career in data management, in managing DBAs, data modelers, and back then we called it information resource management,
Hmm.
and it was a whole separate department. We had 150 people for an airline that were focused on that, and then we were going through a change, and we ended up moving all of that responsibility from a centralized function to a decentralized function and said, okay, all the application teams are responsible, for good data management practices. And I'm curious, what's the state today of, are organizations having separate data governance areas that are managing that, or where is that falling within our organizations today? And where do you think it should fall?
I think it should fall wherever it makes sense for your business. Every business is different. So, for example, if we were in a state government organization, I would recommend a central service provider lead the way, and then you would have distributed smaller boards within each state agency because they're looking to the service provider for that policy guidance. But every agency that service provider provides services to has a different mission. So the way they use data will be different. So they take the policies of data governance and they create procedures or standards to do what they need to do. So that's state government. If you go to federal, I would follow a same model, but in a larger scope. Within private sector, if you're a multinational, I really recommend there being separate boards that represent the laws and regulatory frameworks of each country that you do business in. So I've worked for organizations that had headquarters in Australia, Singapore, the US, and the UK. Each of those had their own separate data governance entities, which communicated to a central body to
Hmm.
align their strategies, but each one did their own thing because the law of the land was different.
Yeah.
They had to be very quick to respond. But that goes back to a very simple rule here. You have to take a look at what is my business strategy? How as a for-profit organization am I going to market? And how do I use this data asset responsibly to do that well, serve my customer and generate revenue without putting myself or my customer at risk?
Hmm.
And
Absolutely.
that will inform the way that you do that.
I think that's a great perspective. Well, this is great because I think we talk a lot of times in security about you can't protect it what you don't know,
Mhm.
if you don't know where the information is, and good data governance practices really makes that happen. So, what final advice would you give to emerging CISOs, new CISOs, current or experienced CISOs, as they're trying to improve their data governance practices?
If you're just starting off, build those criteria for picking the right fuel. Know what kind of data you actually need to achieve your goals. If you're in the middle, if you already know what that fuel is, focus on building a policy stack that will allow you to make the most out of the fuel, to optimize the engine, to operate at high efficiency. If you've already figured all those steps out, there's still work to do. Take a look at the various maturity models and try to get as high as you can to become then a center of excellence where you can share your lessons learned with peers in the industry. Because there are many organizations that need your help as a leader in the space. And if you are there, if you can help other people be better, it will make the world a better place.
I love that. I mean, that's what the Cyber Risk Alliance is all about, and what the Cybersecurity Collaborative is about, and why we bring people together to share that information. So it's heartwarming to hear you say that. So it's been a pleasure to talk with you today, and thanks a lot for taking the time
Well,
today,
I
Stephen.
hope to have an opportunity to speak to you again, Todd. It's been a real pleasure.
Thank you. Likewise. Thank you for tuning in to this week's episode of the CISO Stories podcast. We want to say a special thank you to our sponsor, Asperion. Please subscribe to the CISO Stories podcast and you will receive a new story each Tuesday at 10 a.m. Eastern Time. We'll see you next week for a new episode.